Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you all could join us here today. For newcomers, welcome to Self-Love Done Right, where in this show, we teach you guys how to love yourself. On today's special little program, we're going to talk to some wonderful people, absolutely wonderful. Our guests today include the lovely Ben Viola, the intelligent Jessica Darby, and the seasoned Arlene Goldman. So without further ado, let's bring out our first guest. Please welcome Ben Viola. Ben, I'm so happy you could join us today. So happy.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you.
I think we kind of got that part covered, so.
Ben, why don't you tell us why you're here today?
Yeah, sure. So basically, last couple months I've been struggling with a lot of anxiety and depression. Kind of all started when I moved out to Philly for school. You know, I didn't know what I was dealing with because I've never had these feelings before, so, you know, I just had a lot of trouble being inside the house, and I had trouble, you know, outside the house, and, you know, I had no motivation. I wasn't really eating. I felt shaky all the time. It was just a weird time for me. And
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, so anyway, when I heard of this show, I thought I'd submit a question, but I didn't think I'd be on the show, so that's kind of weird. I thought it'd be a little more anonymous, but that's all right. You know, looking forward to learning new information, and yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we do here. You sent in a question of the day, and I have it right here.
You're not gonna read that out loud, are you?
We sure are. I really wanted to boot you on the nose, but I understand why I can't. So your question is, hello, my name is Ben. I'm a full-time college student. I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression, and I was wondering if you had any tips on how I can learn how to manage it. Ben, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I just want to say thank you so much. You are so brave.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so what we do here on the show involves talking to professionals about your question and helping you find the answers. Our overall goal is to help you find self-love. By the way, I have to say this. Love the shirt. Like, you are absolutely killing this. Absolutely killing it. Now, let's go to Joey and Jessica for more on this topic.
Thanks, John. By the way, love the necklace. It goes so well with that outfit. Really. Anyways, I have here with me psychology major Jessica Darby. How are you doing today, Jessica?
I'm good, Joey. And yourself?
I am doing just perfect. So, I have some questions to ask you today for our guest, Ben. By the way, Ben, love the hair. So why do you think mental illness is so common in adolescents or college students?
So I think that there are a couple of variables that go into that. Some of the big ones, I would say, workload with school is a lot of stress to be putting on young people, as well as minimum wage versus the cost of living and student loans. It's, again, even more stress to be putting on kids. A lot of these mental illnesses are genetic, so kids are getting it from their parents, but I feel like the reason we're seeing a lot more discussion of mental illness now is that people feel more comfortable talking about it. So I don't think there's necessarily more cases now than there were 50 years ago. I think 50 years ago it was just taboo to talk about.
So do you think it's important for individuals to work on their mental health?
Definitely, yes.
Of course. And if someone is struggling, what are some things that they can do?
So I'm a big advocate for healthy coping mechanisms, meditation, going for a walk, going to see a therapist. If you and your therapist feel that it's necessary, they could prescribe medications. When you see people with certain physical conditions and they have medication to treat those conditions, alleviate those symptoms, you're not judging them, so what makes it any different for a mental illness?
What are some tips that you would give to get through an anxiety attack?
It's important to recognize that everybody reacts differently. Everybody has different symptoms, everybody has different triggers, so it's going to vary from person to person. However, what's important is knowing your body, knowing your symptoms, knowing your triggers, and knowing what helps you get through, whether it be drinking water or having a fan blowing cold air on you, deep breathing, or even removing yourself from that environment so you can calm down are just some of the common things. But again, it's going to be different for everyone.
So then, if someone is witnessing a person have an anxiety attack, what can they do?
So I think the best thing for you to do is let them know that you're there if they need anything. It's important to not overwhelm them, but let them know that you're there and you care about them.
So then, what is your definition of self-care?
I would say healthy coping mechanisms like physical and mental hygiene, taking a bath, going for a walk, things that you know will bring you back down to earth and help de-stress you without hurting your body.
So then, going off of that, what is the importance of self-care?
So it's always important to keep in mind that you can't help other people, you can't even function as a human if you can't take care of yourself physically and mentally.
Well, thank you so much for coming into the show today, Jessica. We really appreciate everything you said. Therefore, I'm gonna throw it back over to you, back to the studio, John.
Good stuff. Now that's what I call a cup of self-care. Am I right?
I guess. Yeah.
Now, wasn't that an eye-opener?
Actually, yeah, it was. I mean, she had a lot of good information, so.
Well, it's not over yet.
It's not?
No, it's not.
Okay, I don't know. I just thought maybe.
You thought wrong. Seriously. Love the pants. I just gotta say it. You're killing this. Now we're gonna toss it to Hannah and her therapist, Arlene.
Thanks, John. I'm Hannah Steffen, here with Arlene Goldman. She is a personal therapist that I've been going to for the past couple of years, and she has a lot of information about the topic of self-love and self-care. With that, Arlene, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a clinical social worker in private practice. Been doing it privately for probably at least 10 years. Since March, I've been working from home using the Zoom platform and using FaceTime. And it's working a lot, actually better than I thought it would. So I've been quite busy.
Okay, that's great to hear. So I have some questions to ask you for our guest, Ben. And my first question is, what is your definition of anxiety?
Well, I think anxiety is, I'm going to use the word an epidemic. Starting before the pandemic, I would say a major part of my clients have a diagnosis of some form of anxiety. So it could take many forms. Some people have what's called general anxiety. They just feel anxious all the time. Other people have more specific kinds of anxiety. And it can range from, having panic attacks to obsessive thinking, some kind of obtrusive thoughts that, trouble them. So anxiety takes a form, of many different dimensions. But unfortunately, many, many people in the United States have that diagnosis. And it's a tough one. And there's not a lot of good medications that treat it specifically either, which makes it even harder.
Okay, and going off of that, what is your definition of depression?
I guess it's a general feeling of having negative thoughts and feeling sad and blue. More times than you think is healthy for you. Another major issue in this country is people who have a diagnosis of some forms of depression, and that too is ranging from mild to severe, and it could be classified that way. But generally, it's a feeling of feeling down, feeling sad, feeling blue, and hopefully, there are people who are severely depressed who need to be hospitalized and undergo certain treatments. But in my practice, most of my clients, I would say, probably have some sort of moderate depression.
Why do you think mental illness is so common in adolescents or college students?
a significant amount of mental disorders develop in late adolescence or early adulthood. So that's, I think, another reason why we see it happening. That's when it starts to blossom in many cases. So I think one of the most important things I like to do is when I meet with someone for the first time is to take a pretty good history. And that would involve also family history, because it does tend, to run in families. Anxiety and depression do run in families. There is a genetic component to it.
If someone is struggling mentally, do you think it's a good idea for them to seek help or go to therapy?
I think that, many people who have negative thoughts or are feeling blue can help themselves. Not everyone needs to get professional help. I don't think that's necessarily the case. There's a lot of self-help stuff out there in book form, or Hannah and you specialize in YouTube. Pretty much, when Hannah, I first met you, you knew a lot about certain things because you had studied them on YouTube, and I think they were very helpful to you, tools. You learned a lot of tools using YouTube. So not everyone needs professional help, but if you feel like it's bad more days than it's good days, it might be time to think about, letting a professional help you.
So, if you're in a room with somebody and they're visibly uncomfortable or maybe even having an anxiety attack, what are some things that you can do to help them?
Okay, I think in treating anxiety in general, the goal is to not to avoid. The goal is always exposure of some kind. So when it comes to having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, and say you're with a friend who says, addresses the fact that they're feeling overwhelmingly anxious, or gives you some symptoms that their heart's racing or that they think they're going to faint. So I think it's good to recognize and say, it sounds like you might be having a panic attack. That's okay. No one dies from having a panic attack. It comes and it will leave you. So just maybe you could start to maybe do some deep breathing or some abdominal breathing to slow down your heart rate, because the best thing to do is not to try to fight it, but to let it just pass through and it will end. And to reassure them that they'll be okay. And they will be for the most part.
I was actually going to bring up that tapping method that I know we've talked about in our sessions together. Would you mind talking about that for a little bit?
Well, that's one of the treatments that I use in my office. It's a little bit harder to do. It's called emotional freedom technique. It's a pretty well-known form of dealing with trauma, anxiety, and with nightmares and things like that. But it involves tapping with your hands on certain parts of your body, so meridian points, the same kind of points that are used by acupuncturists. But use your hands to do them, and I teach my clients what the meridian points are. We develop a phrase that we say when we do it, and it's a very good tool to know about. I like that. I like to teach abdominal breathing. This is very easy. I can teach it in 5 minutes. There's books on it, and I think it's a very handy tool to have for people who suffer from anxiety. And I tell people to practice it every day, so that when they feel like they're having a panic attack or they're feeling anxious about going into a supermarket or whatever, they can just take 2 or 3 minutes and do some abdominal breathing and bring themselves down. So yeah, but EFT, emotional, that's a whole form of therapy that would take probably a whole session. But if anyone's interested, that's what it's called. You can look it up. I'm sure you'll find it on YouTube.
I'm sure you would, definitely. So I know you previously mentioned some tips and tools about self-help and self-care, and we're actually going to be getting into that. So with that, what is your definition of self-care and self-help?
Self-help. If you know that if things aren't going right for you emotionally, I think there are some obvious tools that you can either teach yourself or have someone teach you by reading, by going online. And those are things like, there's a whole new body of work out there called mindfulness. And it's kind of a step before meditation, which a lot of people find frightening, that they don't think that they could possibly meditate, but mindfulness is a much easier form of meditation. And so I think that's a very good tool for people who suffer from anxiety to learn about. There's lots of books on it. I'm sure there's lots of videos on it, but it's easier. There's even apps that you can download on your phone and practice mindfulness. Okay, so I think anything you can do to calm your body, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, breathing, are things that are all good self-help tools. Now, if we're just talking in general, of course, about when you're away at school and, just making sure that you get enough sleep and you eat right and you don't isolate yourself. I think we have a huge problem now for everybody, but certainly in colleges, it's, the feeling of being isolated. You're not in class anymore with other students. You're sitting like now in front of a computer screen. So you're missing a lot of that interaction that you would have with other people. It's harder to meet people now. So I think, college dorm life, such as it is, I'm not even sure how many schools have college dorm life now. Rowan happens to be one of them. Is challenging because it can be very isolating. And isolation is not a healthy thing for anybody, let alone, someone in college. So yeah, I think you have to find ways to reach out, whether it's using the Zoom platform or the FaceTime platform or keeping in touch with your family that way, are all important things to, when we're talking about self-care, helping yourself.
You think it's important for people to practice these tips and these tools?
Yeah, I do, especially now in this challenging year that we're all enduring together. And I think it's important probably to mention that we're getting into what we hear is an extremely critical time in terms of the pandemic and the holidays.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing some of your knowledge about this topic. I'm now going to toss it back to the boys in the studio.
Dear Journal, today at the show, I met the cutest boy. Oh, we're back on? Oh, sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry. Dude, I can hear everything you're saying out loud right now.
But notice how I'm writing with my feelings.
Yeah, but you don't have to say it out loud. It's making me feel uncomfortable, so
Well,
don't.
sometimes it helps. Well, I hope this show has helped you in some way with your current life struggles. Have you learned anything new?
Actually, surprisingly, yeah, I did. I think both interviews had a lot of information, gave me a lot to use in my everyday life and really helped me out with my anxiety and depression, so.
Oh,
I'm
Snifflewitz.
sorry, no. Did you just say Snifflewitz? What
Of
is
course I did, but it looks like we're out of time, Ben. So, that's our show. I'm so happy that not only Ben, but every wonderful person at home was able to join us today. We'll see you next time on Self-Love Done Right.
Don't go.